This is a very important topic, and all of us have this in our lives. Archons plant negative voices in your head to make you generate negative emotional energy, and you have to stop them. Now, we know that this is nothing new. This is demonic influence. Sometimes when we feel nervous or upset or in fright or anxiety and stress, it comes from this type of an energy attack, and we have to know how to get ourselves out of that and how thoughts come to us. And it's like a storm, when you see a wave coming one after the other. That's how these negative attacks come towards us, and we have to be able to weather the storm. It's a spiritual thing. Very few scientists today are willing to explore metaphysics to examine life beyond ordinary perception in order to make a connection between the seen and the unseen. Rudolf Steiner, though, one of the most prolific and gifted scientists, philosophers, and esoterics of his time, devoted much of his work to the task of peering behind the veil, sharing his insight into the deeper nature of life and of the world beyond. Regarding anxiety and depression, Steiner spoke of hostile beings in the spiritual world, which influence and feed off of human emotion. Wrote, quote, "There are beings in the spiritual realms for whom anxiety and fear emanating from human beings offer welcome food. When humans have no anxiety and fear, then these creatures starve. People not yet sufficiently convinced of this statement can understand it to be meant comparatively only. But for those who are familiar with this phenomenon, it is reality. If fear and anxiety radiates from people and they break out in panic, then these creatures find welcome nutrition and they become more and more powerful. These beings are hostile towards humanity. Everything that feeds on negative feelings, on anxiety, fear, and superstition, despair, or doubt are in reality hostile forces in supersensible worlds, launching cruel attacks on human beings while they are being fed. Therefore, it is above all necessary to begin with that the person who enters the spiritual world overcomes fear, feelings of helplessness, despair, and anxiety. But these are exactly the feelings that belong to contemporary culture and materialism because it estranges people from the spiritual world. It's essentially suited to evoke hopelessness and fear of the unknown in people, thereby calling up the above-mentioned hostile forces against them. This is what Rudolf Steiner explains to us. Negative emotions are food for inimical spirits. A concept such as this is not readily accepted into the everyday conversation, steered by rigid skepticism and scientific materialism. The traditions of today have sought to expel ancient metaphysical wisdom and its practical application from our lives, and though scientific inquiry is exceptionally valuable, spiritual perception has always been a part of our experience. Bernard Gunther says, and yet, despite the clinical skepticism, all of the ancient mystery schools, true shamanic insights, and esoteric teachings, much of which have been suppressed and or distorted over thousands of years for obvious reasons, have conveyed this truth for the ones with eyes to see and ears to hear, using their own language and symbolism to be the general law. Esoteric Christianity, archons, according to the Gnostics, Lord of Destiny to Hermetism, and predators to the flyers, the topic of all topics, shamanism, Castaneda, the evil magician, according to Gurdjieff, the shaitans, Sufism, the jinn, Arabic mythology, Wetiko, the Native American spirituality, occult hostile forces, Sri Aurobindo, and the Mother, the integral yoga, etc. Dealing with extrasensory or hyperdimensional beings have long been a part of our history and are directly accessible to any of us when proper practice and attention is given to the matter. I know this to be true from my experiences with plant medicine shamanism, where it is entirely possible to enter into the states of consciousness where entire cosmologies of life exist and are available to interact with, finding oneself in the rut of spiraling negative self-talk, depression, crippling anxiety, or uncontrollable Irrational fear is a sign, as Steiner points out, of a disconnection from our true spiritual nature, exacerbated by beings who operate in the spiritual realms. This is why some consider disorders like this to be spiritual illnesses, and until the rift is healed with proper attention given to the development of spirit, the feelings tend to exacerbate and drive one further into distress. Rudolf Steiner says, when humans have no anxiety and fear, then these creatures starve. In my new apartment, I spent time alone, plowing through many texts about the brain and mind before I came across a book by Robert Monroe called Journeys Out of the Body. I practiced some of the experience the book recommended. They didn't cause me to travel out of my body, but did have another astounding effect. I began to see flashes of memory from the first 13 years of my life, of which I had previously had no recall. I didn't understand them at first until a floodgate opened and all the memories rushed in suddenly. I was overwhelmed and could not believe the things I was remembering. I felt like a deer in the headlights, understanding but too horrified to process everything all at once. When the movie, quote unquote, of my memory stopped, I whispered to an empty room, "That's what's wrong. I got brainwashed." From everything I had read, I realized that early childhood experiences are embedded into the subconscious as truth. My subconscious truth was first you get tortured by a man, and then the man treats your cuts, bruises, wounds, and then the man cuddles you and rocks you to sleep, and then you feel loved and safe again. This was exactly the scenario I had been playing out in life without ever knowing why. Never would I have understood this had that dam not broken wide open when it did, and for that I'm grateful. On top of that conditioned behavior, the voices kept telling me I was worthless in this world, but now with my memory returning, I knew differently. I knew that the horrible things that were done to me were not things I had caused, chosen, or deserved. So not only did I need to figure out how overcome being brainwashed to fix my mind, I needed to fix out how to get rid of the voices that plagued me and continued to tell me horrible things about myself. Saw a remarkable similarity between how computers process information and how our brains process information, each running on a program that's inserted by an outside programmer. While the computer program operates by its software code, the brain program operates by electrical impulses traveling specific synaptic paths. I wondered if I could write a mental program that would not only tackle the negative thoughts, hence the voices that were hounding me, but also eliminate or deprogram the brainwashed conditioning that was exacerbating the misery in my life. My theory was to write a mental program and train myself to use that new program more than the existing one until the new program became automatic and the existing program atrophied, weakened to the point it could no longer perform, even if I tried. In other words, to rewire my brain. I first tried to edit the code in my brain, but it didn't work. It was way too complicated to remember while in the throes of unconscious conditioned responses set off by life events or during Archon attacks. I needed to think of something easier, something I could remember while in the midst of older programming being triggered by the world around me. I now knew that all the negative things I'd been taught about myself by my parents, the juvenile detention center, the Catholic orphanage, public schools, and society in general, with regard to who I really was, were not true. It was all lies. I was not a bad and evil person destined to go to hell. I was not a crazy person. I was not a selfish person. I did not hate myself or anyone else. I was not born to hate life, nor was I born to sin. I was not stupid, going nowhere. I was not a bad mother. None of those things were true. And yet, prior to running the new program, I heard this as truth by the voices that felt this as true by the mental conditioning all day and all night long. The That's a Lie program worked perfectly on eliminating the brainwashing conditions, allowing me the mental space I required to become who I wanted to be instead of mindlessly being what others programmed into me. My theory had worked. Once I broke through and conquered the brainwashing effects, I was surprised to find that much of what had been forcefully programmed into my brain as a child was still being utilized by the spirit parasites against me. I was still receiving negative thoughts and messages, which sounded exactly like my own thoughts. The prodding and poking, the suggestions, even demands coming from them were beyond anything I could imagine thinking, much less doing.
But an amazing journey into the psychotic mind, breaking the spell of the ivory tower. As you can see with all my tags and tickets, I've devoured this book and enjoyed every second of it. And there's so much there for us to learn about how we can certainly
There's an interesting story with Sherry. I knew her for 10 years. We were working in prison reform.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I would tell her every once in a while about the patients I had working in psych in the state prison. And one day she goes, "Oh, I know about those voices." And I said, "Well, how do you know about those voices?" She said, "I heard them when I was a young gal." I said, "What?" Wow. She's one of the most spiritual people I know. You know, very bright. She's an engineer. And I'm like, "You got to be kidding." So I kind of like half believed her. It's like, no, this can't be. And so I started throwing all these questions at her that only somebody who heard the voices would know.
Would know.
And she's like, bam, 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 one after another. And I'm like, just what? Whoa. You know, it's like, so, you know, we got to talking about it and said, well, you know, we need to do something with this. We need to let people know.
Yeah.
You know, so we worked on that book for over 2 years. It drove me half crazy. And, but I think we got the gist of it down, how we came to the conclusion that these voices were not hallucinations like the psychiatric mafia insists. If they're running well-defined patterns, and they run like 30 well-defined patterns, they can't be hallucinations. Something is holding them to those patterns.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we're going to dive into today. I think this is one of the most extraordinary conversations. And I want to read Jerry's biography and make sure I get it correct. So BA, Master of Education. So Jerry's a retired licensed psychotherapist. So anyone who, you know, you picked up on this conversation, you think to yourself, this has to be a bunch of woo, or people, you know, coming from super, you know, spiritual side of the world, but with no grounding in, you know, medical experience or whatever. That's not where we're at here. Jerry is someone with 40 years experience on the ground in his own research and personal experiences of these things happening. And from what you've said, Jerry, it wasn't something like the whole concept of the voices that people were hearing. It's not something you came too easy to think that it was something other than an illness. Like,
no, matter of fact, I was in denial for the better part of 20, 25 years. I didn't want to believe it. You know, it's like I didn't want. You know, I wasn't a super religious person, but I wasn't an atheist either. And here's these patterns started emerging once I started talking to these guys. You know, one after another after another, and I'm like, what's going on here? You know, if they're hallucinations, they can't be. These patterns shouldn't exist. I mean, I've seen plenty of hallucinations working in the ER, working in where I did. These weren't hallucinations. These people the voices were talking in complete sentences. You know, there was a conversation going on. I remember, you know, they didn't mention hardly anything about schizophrenia in the 4 years of psychology I had, 2 years of master's degree, and then the PhD program was even worse. I mean, it was piled higher and deeper. They didn't have any idea what was really going on, you know, and what I saw on the front lines. I'd already spent 7 years working in, this was the biggest psychiatric hospital on the planet. There were 10,000 patients there when I got there. It was the size of a small city. You know, it was in Central Georgia, Central State Hospital. And there was every mental illness known to man in there. So for somebody interested in abnormal psychology and being an adrenaline junkie at the same time, that was like heaven for me. It's like, what's going on with this one? What's going on with that one? But the most intriguing were the schizophrenics. You know, And they didn't say hardly anything about that in formal, psychology. It's like they said, there's a chemical brain imbalance and they're having hallucinations.
Oh shit.
Yeah. And it, once I got there, so after graduate school, well, my distrust started earlier than that. I remember one time in undergraduate, so what I hated about undergraduate psychology is you couldn't check out anything they were teaching you. You couldn't go into a lab and see it like the engineers can do, or the biochemists can do. You're given all these books and they're saying memorize this stuff and spit it back out. And I'm like, well, there was no way to test it. You couldn't access a clinical population. You couldn't go into a mental health center and say, listen, I want to talk to a schizophrenic and see what's going on. You couldn't go into a prison or a jail and they won't let you in. They won't let you into a state hospital if you're not a relative. And, they make it low, it's super dangerous and you're going to, no, I spent, 35, 40 years in there. I was never hurt, except once when I provoked it. That was my fault. And even then I wasn't hurt. It was just a close call, and then one of the nurses was, when they told her, when you go into psych ward, don't look anybody in the eye. It's like very scary. They make it very scary. It's like crazy what happened. So the first time I ran into the distrust head on was in undergraduate school. A clinical psychologist has written this paper stating that if two patients with the same delusion met each other, like if both of them thought they were Justin Trudeau or something like that, one of them would have to change who he was.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why would they have to do that? That doesn't make any sense. If they're both crazy, why would one of them have to change to maintain some kind of integrity in the mess? They're messed up anyway. It didn't make any sense to me. So there was no way to check it out. There's no way to see. 8 years later, I was after I finished my master's degree. I was on the second floor of the psych unit that I was assigned to, and here was this new patient walking around talking to his voices, and they said the voices are hallucinations. So I was expecting them to be like word salad. You wouldn't be able to understand anything that they were saying. It would just be like crazy stuff. It wasn't like that. And I saw one after another. They were carrying on coherent conversations with something that I couldn't see. And they were arguing with that, whatever it was. Now, it looked like they were talking to themselves, but why would so many psychotic patients be talking to themselves? You might expect one or two of them. No. They were carrying on coherent conversations. And it was like you're listening to one side of a telephone conversation. You could hear the person talking, but you couldn't hear who was talking back. Yeah. And sometimes they were very animated. Sometimes they broke out into arguments, and screaming contests. It's like, oh yeah, you're no good at it. And it just looked crazy. It didn't make any sense. Especially believing from what they said in the textbooks that this is hallucinations and that's all they say. They don't tell you what the voices say because they treat them as hallucinations.
Your emergency?
I'm dead. I think I'm dead. Oh, time's going by really, really, really slow and my heart's beating backwards.
What makes you think your heart's beating backwards?
Well, normally it goes goop boop, and now it's going boop goop.
Are you having any other symptoms?
I can see sounds. I can hear colors. I forgot how to shit.
Sir, have you taken any illegal substances?
No, I just ate a brownie that a drug addict gave me, but that ain't got nothing to do with my emergency.
And what's your emergency, sir?
I measured my butt crack 3 times, and it was longer each time. I'm splitting into 2 people. Ooh, there's like 17 more brownies on that plate.
It's chapter 114 of the Quran.
Yes.
And it says, in the name of God, the gracious, the merciful, say, I seek refuge in the Lord of mankind, the King of mankind, the God of mankind, from the evil of the sneaky whisperer, who whispers into the hearts of people from among the jinn and among the people.
Right.
I mean, that hit right on. I mean, that was like a direct hit.
Yeah.
Because that's what they do. They whisper into your mind. They whisper into your ear. They tell you all this garbage that's false. That's one of the things that they get very angry over. Is when I would tell a patient that they were parasites and that they were sucking their life energy, they would get furious. They did not like them knowing that at all.
Yeah.
So if the patient was going to go off, they would go off with that piece of information.
Right. So before we looked at your work, most of us were already familiar with the fact that we're being faced with huge attacks from both big tech and big pharma. We recognize this. I think many of us recognize this in this great awakening, if that's what we want to call it, for now, for lack of a better term. But what I'm seeing is that it seems to be mirrored. These parasites, as you mentioned, like vampires sucking out energy, which are the jinn, which are the demons, which are the invisible and negative entities. Their behavior, this parasitical behavior, sucking out energy, mirrors what big tech is also doing. It's like bullies. This big tech is bullying us with the technology that we are stuck with. They're bullying our attention. They're bullying our minds and sucking our energy in a similar way to how even the big pharma is doing. They're bullying us into taking their poisons, and sucking our energy. It's like this parasites seems to be mirrored from these entities to big tech to big pharma. The voices will try to prevent you from reading and digesting our helpful material.
Oh, okay.
And I think I personally experienced this myself. Okay, so, and one thing that stood out was one of the comments that you used from a viewer who actually experienced this. He said, "They won't let me listen to any information about what they are or how to get rid of them. When I tried to listen to these interviews, I fell asleep. Later, when I tried to remember what was said, all I could remember was that there was nothing useful in them and the deception was complete." It's clearly that this is a threat to the survival of these voices. So viewers might experience some kind of sleepiness, some kind of distraction may occur. And ultimately understanding that this is the very last thing that the voices want their victims to become aware of. I'm personally extremely grateful for coming across Jerry's work. Who is Jerry, you might ask? Okay, so Jerry is a retired licensed psychotherapist with over 40 years of experience working with and studying. Yes, so that's both, working with and studying the thought processes of psychotic and criminally insane patients in some of the most volatile psychiatric institutions in the nation. He was awarded the State of Arizona's Meritorious Service Award and the Pima College Apple Award of Teaching Abnormal Psychology. His formal academic training comprises a BA in psychology from Temple University, a master's degree in counseling from the University of Georgia, and 2 years of study in a PhD psychology program. So clearly, very qualified. He is the co-author of an amazing journey into the psychotic mind, breaking the spell of the Ivory Tower, and is currently has a private practice in Arizona. So what I can see, Jerry, is that you've graduated, you've taught, you've researched, you've been in the clinical field, you've written a book. You're a MACE practitioner, which I'm sure you're going to go into later on, and I'll put everything in the description box for the viewers later. But so this is a little introduction to who Jerry is. So lastly, before I hand the mic over to Jerry, I'd like to quote C.S. Lewis from your website again in the Screwtape Letters. He says, so Screwtape says, "There are two equal and opposite errors to which our race can fall about the devils. One is to disbelieve in their existence, and the other is to believe, and to feel an excessive and unhealthy interest in them. They themselves are equally pleased by both." So there seems to be that, they're happy for those who don't believe in the devil and those who are excessively believing in the devil. So we are all about seeking the middle path. So having said all of that, Jerry, welcome, Jerry, to the Muslim and non-Muslim viewers on Endgame Islam. Help us find the right balance in this satanic age of scientism and pharmakia.
Okay.
Yeah.
You want me to just kind of start off with how it all began, or?
Yes, please. There's going to be definitely viewers who are not aware of your story. Yep.
Okay. Well, you just, burst in and ask whatever questions you want.
Yeah, sure.
In the meantime, one thing that I have noticed is that the Muslims pay a whole lot more attention, serious attention to the existence of these demons than Christians do.
Yeah.
And Christians kind of, oh yeah, they exist, and they throw them into the back seat and go, yeah, we know they're around, but they don't take them seriously.
Yeah.
It's almost like, oh yeah, now with science today and all our modern technology and all the stuff we have today, demons are like passe. I mean, they're just not around anymore. And they don't really take them seriously, and they don't spend a lot of attention on them. And what they do is they come around and they bite them in the back, without even knowing. So the greatest accomplishment the devil ever made was that the devil doesn't exist.
Yeah.
That's very dangerous. After almost 45 years, I've studied these voices extensively, and they run a list of recurring, persistent, consistent patterns. Okay? And these patterns happened at the huge state hospital where I worked. They happened in the mental health centers. They happened in the private psych hospitals where I worked. They happened when I was working in the psychology department of state prison. And now that I'm dealing with clients all over the world, these same patterns exist with the voices there.
Yeah.
Now, bottom line is the psychiatric mafia is telling the Western world, the entire planet, that these voices are hallucinations. That's doing everybody a grave injustice.
Yes.
If they're running set, repeatable, specific patterns, they can't be hallucinations. Hallucinations are random. They're all over the place. You can't predict them. You can clearly predict what these things are going to say. And you can. They're on my website, jerrymarzinsky.com, under articles.
Right.
There's a whole list of 23 repeatable, specific patterns that these voices run.
Yeah, we've been studying these patterns, and I just want to say that you mentioned that the Muslims take the devil seriously, and or the demons, because it's mentioned throughout the whole Quran that he is our clear avowed enemy, and the jinn are mentioned throughout the Quran. You're right. The Muslims take it more seriously, but what I've seen is that we have also been victims of the scientism that has come through, and it seems to have overridden anyone's belief about these demons actually being what they are.
Well, that's in both cases. That's with the Christians too.
Yeah.
But you guys have specific prayers against them.
Yeah.
I don't know of any specific prayers against the jinn or the demon that the Christians have. I've never seen one.
Mm-hmm.
They have the general prayers. Now the demons absolutely hate the 23rd Psalm. Yeah. I've had patients tell me that they react like worms thrown on a hot frying pan when the 23rd Psalm is repeated.
Yeah.
I know you guys have specific prayers against them. I have a listing of some of them here with me.
Yeah.
But you're right. The scientism has hit both Christians and Muslims.
Yeah.
Jesus was reported in the Bible to cast out demons 23 different times.
Yes, yes.
And yet the Christians are going, oh, well, that's just, an old fairy tale. I mean, there's really no demons around. That was 2,000 years ago or something like that. It's it doesn't bother us today. Mm-hmm. No. If you get that list of patterns that I found exist, they're the same patterns that the mainstream media is spitting out at us right now.
Yes, yes.
It's coming over the mainstream media. Yeah. So, I'm just going to read a few of them.
Yeah. Before you do, Jerry, just on those patterns, Brother Sadi, you wanted to say something. Yeah. If you can, very quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Jerry, I just wanted to say that when they ascribe hallucinations to these whispers, or as we say in Islam, waswasa, or frequent intrusive thoughts, it's very tied into chaos as a principle. They attribute everything they don't understand to chaos. They interpret human life to the Big Bang Theory, the theory of evolution. Everything has an origin that is placed within chaos, and they don't know. And just by them saying it's hallucinations, because it's like these thoughts have a clear agenda. They are always trying to steer you away from God. So if they have an agenda, how can they be something that is chaotic? It seems they have a purpose. They have an agenda.
Well,
Yeah.
they do have an agenda, and that agenda is not chaotic. They go about it in a very predictable way.
Absolutely.
They're always after the destruction of the individual, and they can put thoughts into the human's thought stream. What we're taught from the time we're born is that all thoughts that you hear belong to you. That's a massive fallacy.
Yep.
Matter of fact, virtually none of your thoughts belong to you. Now we all have a thought stream where you have this voice rambling in your head all the time. It's telling you stuff you already know. It's telling you bad stuff about yourself. It's telling you judgmental stuff about everybody else. It just goes on and on and on, and it never stops. Okay? If that's who you really are, then who is it that's listening to that voice? You're the one listening to it. You are not it.
I woke up to this about a month ago. Things have changed for me drastically. I'm spotting them. I'm recognizing how things are different, and where the negative effects are, where the weight, the feeling of heaviness, I can recognize things that I would have been oblivious to in the past, thinking, as you said, as we're taught, that it's us. I mean, now that you mentioned this, I've been speaking about this endlessly, and this, I'm sure you recognize this new age positive movement that's out there, trying to train everyone into positive thinking.
Yeah, so bad.
What I see is, for example, and I'm not criticizing Joe Dispenza, but I see him as one of the leaders in getting people to train themselves out of negativity and into positivity. But the problem is, as you've rightly said, that you're still believing that these thoughts are your own thoughts. Yeah. So when you're doing that, as you said, that means that there's something wrong with you. So no matter how much you're trying to train yourself into positive thinking, it's like as if you're trying to do something shackled, because you're accepting that, you're weak, you're the one with the problem, because it's still your own thought. But the second, as you said, you separate this, that's it. There's a weight lifted, there's a freedom. Now you're stronger, and now you can actually make progress. I completely agree. So this is why we're doing this today. Yeah.
I've had some, one schizophrenic wrote me and said, now that I know that the voices aren't me, I can handle this.
Yes. Yep.
And that's the same way with, they hit all of us. It's not just schizophrenics. They hit schizophrenics worse than they do everybody else, but they hit us all.
Right.
They will put, they have complete access to your lower mind. They can pull up every rotten thing that you've ever done